I got an interesting message for you today. A little mind discussion about genetics. Very interesting thought, and it applies for both sides of the belief spectrum, whether you believe in God or whether you're an atheist or whatever. Think about this for a moment. You have two parents. Each one of those parents has two parents. Each one of those parents has two parents, and so forth. The more generations you go backward, the equation grows exponentially. If you go back just 10 generations, think about it. The mathematical equation would be, if you were to count how many people are involved in the creation of you, well, you have two parents, each one of them two parents. So it's two I forgot the word for it. In Hebrew, it's called chizka. You put that little, half of a triangle, and then you write two, forget the name in English, to the second degree or whatever. So you add 2 plus 2 to the second degree plus 2 to the third degree, because now the third generation, right? You got 8 people involved. 8 people involved to produce the 4 grandparents you have, to produce the 2 parents you have, to produce you. So you go back with that and you run back to the distant past. And eventually you run into trouble because, well, you get to a number that is so fast just by going back 100 generations, which is about 4,000 years if you average out a generation over 40 years. You realize the number is so astronomical, it's kind of like a paradox. It's like trying to explain the beginning of the universe by using the Big Bang. It's impossible. The laws of thermodynamics, right? The entropy. If you go back in time, there is so much available energy, it has to have a beginning, because you have to start from 1. But if you keep going back exponentially more, 2 parents for each child, you realize it's infinite. In other words, impossible. So you have to come to the conclusion that at one point, the 2 parents that came together and gave birth to a child themselves had the same parents. It's just science. It's just math, because the number has to decrease. It cannot forever increase. And if it decreases, therefore, there is a shortage or a lack of variety of parents. You have the same parents giving birth to multiple children, and those children come together to produce more children, and the children come together to produce more children. They have to share the ancestry. Now again, I said this applies for both people who believe in God and atheists. Now for us, it really is simple to understand, because we know that, the Lord created Adam, and out of him came Chava. They had children, and, the children intermarried within themselves. Cain took a wife, well, one of his sisters, in marriage, and they brought forth descendants, and down, through Seth, all the way down to, Enoch, and then Noach, Shem, Ham, and Yefet, who had their wives, and they themselves came together. Well, think about this. All the peoples of the earth come through Noach and his wife, who had 3 children, and their wives. So obviously they have children. The children have to come together to produce more offspring, to come together and produce more offspring. So the number starts very small, and then it increases to the large variety where you could plug it back into this mathematical formula I gave you with the 2 parents for each child. And then, of course, you need 2 children who are adults now to produce another child. Now, if you do not believe in God and you deny the story of Noach and Adam and the creation, you still have to face the same reality. Whether you believe in evolution, well, it's the same thing. There was a first man, there had to be, and there had to be a first woman. Now, that's another story. If you believe in evolution, that's quite impossible. for the man and woman to evolve separately because the procreation system is very specific. You can't procreate with an ape. You have to have two things of the same, race, the same genetic material. We call ourselves Homo sapiens. You cannot procreate with an ape. So you had to have a man and a woman, human beings, to come together to produce offspring, and the offspring had to multiply. So either way you look at it, we do have one common ancestor. And yes, they had to procreate together. Now here's the catch. Here's what really makes it interesting, because nowadays the scientific community would go against what we call fornication, incestry, or I forget the name when you sleep with a relative. It's frowned upon by most people, except maybe some Arab sects. Even the Torah forbids it in the days of Israel, of the people, of the 12 tribes. And the reason being is that after a while, after a few generations from the beginning, mutations started occurring. And mutations could multiply and create real problems if they are, if they come together with another mutation from the opposite parent. I'll give you an example to make my point clearer. If you have a faulty genome that is supposed to produce strong bones, well, as long as the person you come together with, your spouse, your marital partner, has a proper genome, the offspring will have one genome from you and one genome from her. Therefore, he will still have the proper instructions in his genetic code to produce vital bones. But if you and your partner come from the same family where both of you have that defect, your offspring could inherit the defective code from both of you, and therefore will be what you call inbred, where he is not functioning well. He has no proper genetic code. His bones would be brittle and faulty. So that is why we go against, incest and the rest of that thing, not to marry your first cousins and your brothers and sisters, because it's just not well. But then again, this is evidence to support the biblical creation rather than evolution. Because the biblical creation describes this creation in the way that it has been deteriorating since the beginning. Was created perfect, no flaws, and over time, things got more and more corrupt, degenerated, mutated. We lost the majority of the magnetic force shielding us from cosmic rays and radiation. The amount of cancer cells have been increasing exponentially. The pollution, all of these different things that you multiply over time, and you see that really the quality and the number of mutation has increased over time, not decreased. Therefore, in order for this human species to exist and get to this level, it had to have a perfect start where people were sleeping with their brothers and sisters in order to procreate. They had to have a perfect genome without all of these faulty mutations. Otherwise, the human species would have ceased to exist a long time ago. Imagine if nowadays everybody just slept with their brothers and sisters. Well, it wouldn't take more than 4 to 5 generations where all of humanity would be completely sick and diseased and die off at a young age with all kind of heart failures and kidney failures and lung failures. Because we do not have a perfect genome anymore. We are all so flawed, which is why we have so much, need for medicine and doctors and surgery. They didn't have those things back in the day. Whether you believe in God or not, thousands of years ago, the people were much healthier. Obviously, they survived. The evidence is you. They could drink from the rivers. We read the story of Gideon. The men knelt down to drink from the river. They were fine. No dysentery or dysenteria, whatever it's called in English. Drinking bad water, getting all kind of bacteria. All of those diseases came with time. They weren't here in the earlier days, which is evidence for biblical creation, not evolution. Evolution points the arrow towards progress as time goes by. Meaning you grow, things get better. But what we actually see in reality is things get worse. The further back you go, things were better. Genetically speaking, conditionally speaking, the earth, the habitat, everything was better, which is why men could procreate with their close relatives up to a certain point where the Lord said no more, which is, again, the tribes of Israel. Think about it. 12 sons of one man, Yaakov. And now they were intermarrying within themselves. And it got to a point where they were too close. So now those laws came into play. Now keep some distance. Don't marry your first cousins. Don't marry someone who shares a parent with you. Because now we really have to make sure to protect the future generations from degradation and genetic mutations. But Abraham, well, Sarai was his half-sister, he said. That was fine. The Lord did not protest. Because that was, 4, 5, 6 generations before that. Where there was still enough genetic purity and variety within the code of a single human being. Adam was created with a perfect genome. Chava had a perfect genome. He didn't have Gilbert's disease, no Crohn's disease. He didn't have inherent, blood glucose, whatever, all these diseases that we have nowadays. Tendency for Parkinson and Alzheimer and all those other things. Those things are new. They come from mutations. So every time you hear evolutionists talk about mutations and natural selection, well, that's a bad thing, not a good thing. Mutations don't create, they destroy. They take what already is and corrupt it. Look at an essay and now, mess up a few words in it. Cause some mutations. You didn't add any value, you destroyed value. Now some of the words have typos in them. If you write in code, it wouldn't compile properly. You didn't evolve, you devolved. And that is why now we are so faulty and have so many diseases. It's not hard to understand people, it's so clear to see. You're just rebellious and you are unwilling to accept the reality of God. And that's all there is to it. Because again, you have to accept the fact that we all come from a common ancestor. There had to be 2 human beings, male and female, to procreate. And then, after a while, there were enough of them to start going down this pyramid, like I've explained earlier in the message. 8 great-grandfathers, 4 grandfathers, 2 parents, and 1 you. But before it had to be 2 people to produce 2 people, to produce 2 people, to produce 2 people. Same parents. And they were fine, because they were created by God with His infinite wisdom, without genetic mutations and dysfunctions. So enough of this nonsense. Enough of all that godlessness. Just repent, humble yourselves, acknowledge your Maker, do what's right, and be delivered. That's it. Real simple. A child can get this.